Hey everybody, welcome to Gadberry Leadership Coaching. I'm David Gadberry and I'm glad to be with you today. I've got some exciting things to talk to you about. And, thanks so much for being a part of our podcast. I want to encourage you to subscribe and make sure you go to our YouTube channel, Gadberry Leadership Coaching, and you can subscribe on there and push that little bell and it'll alert you every time that where a new podcast comes up. We'd love for you to be a part of the Leadership Coaching Network and just go along this journey with us. We just want to add value to as many people as we possibly can. And my whole goal in life is to help people and organizations discover, develop, and deploy the potential that they have. And so I want to encourage you to be a part of that. Be looking for some upcoming group coaching experiences that we're doing. You can bring yourself as an individual or your entire team. It's a great environment. It's a virtual setting on a Zoom platform. So synergistic because you're answering questions, discussing topics, and interacting with not only me as your coach, but also other entrepreneurs or business leaders or ministry leaders that are trying to develop and deploy their potential as well. So it's just a great experience. Would love for you to be a part of one of those. There are going to be probably 4 this year, and you can register for each of them. And so I'll be talking more about those at upcoming and giving you more details. So watch my Facebook page, Gadberry Leadership Coaching. You can follow us on Twitter at Coach Gadberry. On YouTube, like I said, Gadberry Leadership Coaching, and then right here on this podcast, the Life and Leadership with David Gadberry. So just so glad to have you. And if this helps you at all, if you're receiving anything from this, if this adds value to you at all, please feel free to share it with others, because our goal is to add value to as many people as we possibly can. We want to make a difference. So that being said, let's get right into what we're going to talk about today. Today, I want to talk about the power of leadership and what is one of the most powerful things in leadership. And it's going to surprise you what we're going to be talking about. So welcome to Gadberry Leadership Coaching. It's my pleasure to have you here with us.
Welcome to Life and Leadership with David Gadberry. We're excited that you're joining our leadership community. There's a lot of information about leadership, but a lot of times it's too sterile for real life. Life is messy and leadership can be messy. Here we talk about real leadership in the context of real life. If you're a leader looking for tips, insight, and wisdom on leadership, you can follow David on social media. And for upcoming group coaching experiences and more, go to gadberry.org. David is the lead pastor of Summit Church in Canyon, Texas, and we would love to invite you to be a part. For more information, go to yoursummitchurch.com. This is the Life and Leadership Podcast.
All right, so today we're going to be talking about the power of leadership. And, what is it that gives leadership its power, its strength, its influence? Well, there's a lot of things that we could consider in this context. We could consider a lot of things, charismatic personality, credibility, honesty, integrity, all of these kind of things, relational context, the ability to connect. And so all of these things are really good and they're very important, and all of them have to do with leadership and they give leadership power. But today I want to talk to you about one of the most powerful things you can do as a leader. I think one of the things we think as leaders often, and this doesn't matter what level of leader you are, if you're a business leader, if you're an entrepreneurial leader, if you're a ministry leader, if you're a family leader, if you're a student leader, or whatever the case may be, if you find yourself in leadership roles and you're aspiring to lead, a lot of the times we think that the most powerful thing we can do is talk. Because a lot of times people who are pursuing leadership can be very good at communicating. And we find it easy to connect with people when we're talking. We believe if we're leading that what we're saying is important and should be important and should have deep meaning. We believe in vision casting, because leaders have to vision cast. If you're going to get buy-in from people who are going to follow you, then you have to cast that vision. And a lot of these things have to do with talking, communicating, declaring, whatever you want to call it. And we see that as a very powerful tool. Most of us see that as the most powerful tool we have in our tool belt. But it's not. I'm going to tell you today that the truth is it's the opposite of that is the most powerful tool in your tool belt, and that is listening. And to be honest with a lot of leaders, and I've had this problem in my own life and still do sometimes, is we just would rather talk than listen. We're very driven. We're very studied. We've strategized. We have a lot to think about and a lot to say. And so we'd rather get that out and communicate that and connect and cast that vision than we would to listen. But the listening has such greater power in your organization, because what listening does is it makes you able to observe and become aware of great ideas and great content. And it helps you to kind of keep your ear to the ground in your organization. It gives you the opportunity to develop relationships at a higher level and a more intimate intensity. It gives you an atmosphere of trust, simply because when your team knows you hear them, they trust you because they feel like that you are in it together. You get greater buy-in because people are always going to buy into vision in a greater way if they feel like they're putting their own fingerprints on it. And so when we listen, it gives us so many options and gives us so many opportunities for growth and development and relationship and influence and credibility, which all leads to powerful leadership. So today what I want to do, just really quickly, I'm not going to take a whole lot of time, and I would love to get your feedback on this and hear your comments and just connect with you on this because I really think it's very important. It's very powerful to be a good communicator. I'm not going to deny that. It should be a very strong tool in your toolbox as a leader. It really should. I mean, you should be able to not just communicate, but connect. It's a skill that needs to be honed. It needs to be developed. It needs to be practiced, because to be a great leader, you are going to need to be a good communicator. And I'm not just talking about getting up and speaking in front of people. I'm talking about someone who connects clearly when they communicate in any capacity of communication. So it's obvious that what we say and the way that we say it is very important. But we cannot allow that to override the massive importance of listening. I've heard a lot of people say, the Bible says in James that we should be quick to hear, slow to speak, and slow to anger. Have you ever noticed that people who are fast to speak are a lot of the times fast to anger as well? I think it indicates an impatience about us. But someone said one time that God gave you 2 ears and 1 mouth, so you'd listen twice as much as you talk. There's many scriptures in Proverbs that talk about listening and about, even a foolish person seems wise if they listen instead of talk. And so I just want to encourage us. This is a very powerful thing. But, I see a lot of people in leadership movement or sales movements or different kind of, business, self-help kind of communication. A lot of times we take principles that really should be looked at from a heart perspective, and we turn them into methods of success. And so you hear somebody talk about listening, and we practice quote unquote listening because we're using it to get our team to succeed instead of just listening. You see what I'm saying? And so I want to talk to you first about, I think, some mistakes we make in our listening that or maybe I should call it types of ways that we listen that are mistakes because they hinder us from truly listening. So the first one I want to talk about, there are many ways that we listen, and most of them don't really result in truly hearing people. Listening and hearing are different things, but they do end in frustration for everyone involved. So the first one is passive listening. Passive listening. And what passive listening is this: we're listening, but not really. This kind of listening is patronizing. It's very irritating for someone who's on the receiving end of that. In other words, I'm pretending to listen to you to make you feel like you're being heard, but I'm not really hearing what you're saying. I was talking to somebody the other day that's in an organization, and they really love the organization, but they're very frustrated with the leadership in the organization right now simply because of this issue, passive listening. Because the leadership in the organization makes it very clear that we're coming down to the very every level of the organization, and we want to be on the front lines, and we want to have meetings, and we want to listen to what you have to say. But what's happened is it's become a very passive listening type approach, because what is very clear to the people who are on the front lines in this organization, that these meetings are literally only to patronize them and make them feel heard, because it's obvious that the leaders already have in their mind the way they see it, and they're not going to change their mind or their thinking. And so this listening doesn't help the organization at all. There's no benefit from it. And it's even creating frustration because the people in the organization that are being so-called listened to realize they're just patronizing us. They're just trying to make us feel like we're being heard, but they're not really listening. That's a mistake. Passive listening produces frustration in an organization, and it will create problems for you in the long run. The second is distracted listening. If you've watched any of our podcasts and you've heard me talk about working with people who have ADHD, and you hear me talk about that in my life and that I've had that for years, you can really relate to this. And this is something that I've had to work on myself because, if you have ADHD or you're just a very driven, busy person, you can easily fall into distracted listening, where you're listening, but not to the person talking. You're listening instead to the thoughts in your own head about what you're going to respond to the person who's talking. And some leaders obviously would rather hear their own voice more than they would be successful at connecting with those they lead. That's just the truth. And we'd never admit that. We're never going to come out and say, hey, I'd rather hear myself talk than you talk. I hope you wouldn't say that. But the truth is we do that a lot. And whether it's because we have a lot on our mind, or whether it's because we don't know how to be present in a moment, or whether it's just because we're egotistical and we need to be quiet and let someone else speak. The truth is distracted listening is hurtful, and not only is it hurtful, but it's not helpful. And what I mean by that is when you're listening and you're truly hearing what people in your organization are saying, you pick up on things that will help your organization grow. But if you're being distracted in your listening, then it is worthless and valueless, and you are injuring the person that you're listening to. There's nothing that feels worse than talking to someone, but you can see in their eyes they're not hearing you. They're not really even paying attention to you at all. It just hurts. And I know that there have been people that have communicated to me over the years that have experienced that, probably a lot of people. And I've worked really hard and am still working on that because of dealing with ADHD. I find my mind going several different directions. My thought patterns are different than other people's. I hear other conversations that are going on around me. It's very, very important that we as leaders learn to not be distracted listeners, but to be focused, in the moment, present listeners. The third and last wrong way to listen is pretentious listening. Listening from a place of pretense. In other words, forcing the person speaking to play a pretentious game with you. I cannot stand that. Listen, I'm just going to be honest with you. Pretension and pretentiousness I just can't stand it. I think one of the reasons is I've never known how to play that game. I'm not a person who's dishonest about myself or about my life or about where I'm at. And I don't know how to pretend to be something that I'm not. I just don't know how. I've always hated that. I'm not trying to say that I'm some kind of better than someone or anything like that. It's just something that's just always been a problem for me. And probably because I grew up as a preacher's kid and I saw a lot of pretending, and not just from church people, but also from ministry people. And I still see a lot of it. And to be honest, we all can be a little guilty of it in some settings, but we have to be careful not to be pretentious. There's nothing worse than being listened to by someone that's listening pretentiously. In other words, they're making you play the game of what they're pretending. And you know that we're pretending, and you know the truth about the situation, but it feels like you're being pulled in. A leader who's not themselves but pretends to be something else, someone else, forces everyone in their organization to play along and pretend that they're a part of that, because the entire culture of the organization is inauthentic because it's affected by the pretense of the leader. This happens so often, and most of the time the leader doing it has become so invested in the fake character that they're playing that they've created this character, and they're completely unaware of it because they begin to believe the lie. It happens all the time. They lose themselves. And then to fit in the organization, everyone has to play along. It's ridiculous. It's manipulative. It will destroy an organization, and it will really mess with the mental capacities and mental health of everybody around that situation. There's no reason to pretend, and don't be a pretentious listener. Making people communicate to you in a way that is not accurate or that is not true, but we're all just playing along because we know what you want to hear, not what needs to be said. And as leaders, the one of the most harsh things that we can do, or defective things that we can do, that would hurt our organization the most, is to pretend, because you cannot build on a faulty foundation, and you cannot know what direction to go if you're not honest about where you are. And so it's a very bad habit, and it's not necessary. And to make others play that game is ridiculous. And so stop being the person who, if you are, being the person who only wants to hear what they want to hear, but start being the person who wants to hear what they need to hear, because that's how growth happens. I love what Andy Stanley said. He said, leaders who don't listen will eventually be surrounded by people who have nothing to say. I mean, think about the environment when a leader doesn't listen, or leaders on teams don't listen. Pretty soon, the people that are following them or that are contributing to that organization, at some point, they just say to themselves, there's no reason for me to talk. There's no reason for me to bring ideas. There's no reason for me to be creative, simply because I'm not being heard, and the leaders in this organization don't listen. I don't lead by consensus. I think leading by consensus is foolish. I think every time you see it in history, and every time you see it in ministry or in biblical things, it always ends badly. I'm not a person who says that we got to get everybody's agreement before we can do anything. I think it depends on what level of group that is. But you can't lead your whole entire organization by consensus of the entire organization. And it's very hard to build consensus that way. So I think you lead your organization by values that are developed by the organization, but you have to, at some point, the executive team, the leadership team has to take the role and responsibility of saying, this is the direction we're going to go, and we need everybody to get on board with that. And we're going to cast vision to you to show you the rewards and the effects of getting on board with that. And we want you to own it and put your fingerprints on it. And there are different methods to use that. But we don't lead by, hey, everybody's got to agree. Because here's the bottom line. you know, especially in our culture today, so many people are opinionated. No one's ever going to fully agree on everything. So you can't lead that way. But that's not what this is. That's not what this is. When we say leaders who don't listen will eventually be surrounded by people who have nothing to say, it's not because you're leading by consensus. It's because there's no trust culture. If we as leaders do not listen in certain ways, and we're going to talk about in just a moment, the ways to listen. If we don't do that, here's the bottom line. At some point, there's no reason for anyone to talk. We're going to miss out on great opportunities, great ideas, great insights, great awareness. We're going to miss out on all of that because we refuse to listen, because the people around us don't trust us to listen and don't trust us to hear, and therefore they'll just stop speaking. And when you're in a room and you're a leader and the only voice that matters in that room is yours, you need to stop and go, whoa, what is going on here? How come no one's responding to me? How come no one's talking back? How come I'm not getting feedback? Listen, I believe in the opposite of that. I believe in having a continual feedback loop in your organization, that you are constantly hearing back from every area and every person in the organization, that you're hearing back on how things are going or what's going on, what worked and what didn't work. That's how you become effective. That's how you grow. But being an island to yourself and then just coming and trying to put that imprint on everyone else doesn't work. How many times have we seen it, and how many times have we seen the destruction of it? So I'm just encouraging us, leading is listening. I'm going to say it again. Leading is listening. If you want your leadership to be more effective, if you want your leadership to have greater buy-in, if you want your leadership to be wise, then understand leadership is listening. So if those are the wrong ways to listen, then what are the right ways to listen? We're just going to go through these really quick. You know, if we learn to listen well, we'll be surrounded with ideas, with innovations. We'll be surrounded by empowered people, and we've filled up with contributions. I mean, think about all of the great ideas and great things and great innovations that could be made if we would just listen. Learning to listen in a way that empathizes with and seeks to understand the people we're leading, it'll create an organizational culture where those on our team will feel completely comfortable bringing their contributions to the team without any insecurity. You know, listening will help our organizations. It will help those who belong to our teams, and it will help us again to gain real influence that will give us room to take bold steps and know that the team is going to follow. Not listening will do the exact opposite. So how can I be excellent at listening then? If leadership is listening, how can I be excellent at listening? Here's how we should do it. Number one, listen intentionally. In other words, when you know you're going to be meeting with somebody, just because you're a leader doesn't mean you shouldn't take notes. Just because you're a leader doesn't mean you shouldn't pay attention. You go into that meeting with intentional questions that you want answered. And then you can listen intentionally for the answers you need. Instead of just passively or inadvertently or in informal discussion, you can go into meetings and you can go into moments and you can walk into people's offices and sit down with a series of questions to intentionally hear them. And when you intentionally listen, you focus, and you're not hearing the reiterations of things you say, but you're hearing the feedback, true life, real time feedback of how it's going or what the thinking is about certain things. You can also hear things where you're not right. You can also hear things of changes that need to be made, little modifications. You can tell if something is bigger than you thought it was or smaller than what you thought it was. It's very important, but listening intentionally. In other words, I am being purposeful when I listen. I'm not just listening because I'm reacting to what someone's saying, but I am intentionally going into this conversation to listen. And I have specific questions that I want to ask, and then I want to hear that what's being said. The second thing is listen sincerely. And again, pretentious people aren't real people. It's very hard to like a pretentious person because you don't really know a pretentious person, because in your heart of hearts, you know that what you see and what you hear and what you're experiencing in that person isn't the real person. And so it's very hard to deal with. And when we listen, but we're not listening sincerely with an open mind and an open heart and being sincere, it is of no value. And people know. I don't know why when we're pretentious, we think people don't see it or don't get it, or when we're egotistical, or when we're overly obnoxiously bold. I think that all those are those kind of things are necessary. Boldness and strength and all that is necessary. But sometimes we carry it too far, and people know. And they know when we're not listening, and they know when our listening is not sincere. I know that sounds weird, because listening is something you're doing you're the passive person in the engaging. But the truth is, people know. They can see it in your eyes. They can see it in your body language. They can see it in your responses, what you say in response, the way you position yourself, the faces that you make. It's very important that we understand this. So be intentional in our listening and be sincere in our listening. And then the next thing is be active in our listening. Now, I'm not saying just use those methods. I mean, it's good to use those methods of active listening where you nod your head to let them know this is body language. You let them know I'm listening. I hear you. I get it. You're leaning in. Those are really important things to do. But also active listening could be saying, oh, I hear you saying, and I know these are methods, but they're good methods. There's nothing wrong with them. But it's more than that. It's not just using those methods to look like you're being an active listener, but to truly actively listen. I mean, to truly engage with your ears and with your mind into what that person is saying, and picking up on what they're saying. This is a time where you can learn, do they really understand the values of our organization? You can learn, do I really understand the values of our organization? You can learn the intricate details of someone's thinking. Man, so many benefits to just actively engaging in that conversation, being totally 100% present in that moment. It's very important. And then the last thing is empathically listening. And we all have learned this. If you've been studying leadership very long, you've learned this especially in management circles. Stephen Covey taught us how to listen empathically. In other words, listen not just what someone is saying, but where they're coming from. Put yourself in their shoes. Stop filtering what they're saying through the filter of your own experiences, the filter of your own wishes or desires of what's being said, but really listen to where they're coming from, how they feel, what they're saying, but also what they're carrying, what's going on in their world. You know, what their perspective is, what their vantage point is. Stop trying to shift what they're saying into your vantage point, but literally see it from their vantage point. So these are the ways we want to listen. The most powerful thing you can do as a leader in your organization, in whatever capacity you lead, the best thing you could do is not talk, it's listen. So thanks for joining us today for Gadberry Leadership Coaching and on our podcast. And man, I really do appreciate you listening to our podcast, and I really do appreciate you subscribing, and I really do appreciate you sharing this with others. You know, we want to make a difference, and I think leadership makes a difference. And I think the more we can talk about it, and the more we can talk about it in real life context, the better off we all are. And so thank you for being a part. You know, if you live in the area, we have a church here called Summit Church, a great church in Canyon, Texas. We're so excited about all the things that God is doing in and through Summit Church. And I'm the lead pastor here, and just these people are like none other. We love them so much. So if you're in the area, you can always come in and visit us and hang out. And if you would like to avail yourselves to Gadberry Leadership Coaching, there are a lot of ways you can do that. And ways you can find out about that is go to our website at gadberry.org, our Facebook page at Gadberry Leadership Coaching, and you're going to hear most all of that through our podcast and YouTube. So make sure you subscribe and push that little bell, and so you can know when we're putting new podcasts out. And again, thank you. Thank you sincerely. It makes a difference to me to know that there are people that are getting value out of what we do. And we just want to make a difference. So today I want to encourage you to add value to someone else's life. I make one guarantee in my company, my Gadberry Leadership Coaching. I make one guarantee, and that is this: that if you add value to others, the greater value will be added back to you. That's a guarantee. I promise you that will happen. So thank you so much for being a part today. God bless you. And I hope that you discover and develop and deploy all the potential that God created in you. God bless.